Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, episode 15, brought to you by the Sofa Sports Podcast, the FNX Network, and the brand new app Pitch DMM. I'm your host, Harry Simew, and on this edition, I'm joined by sports informative Chris Davison. How you doing, mate?
Hi, Harry. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, all good. Glad to have you back, mate. And hope you're
Good
looking forward to the summer.
Yes,
we thought we were done, but we're not. Also joining me this evening is London Evening Standard journalist James Benge. Welcome back to the show. How have you been?
Yeah, very good. It's been a mad day, as it always is around Arsenal, but it never seems to end, so I can't wait for the summer.
That's right. There's nothing like a good summer break, is there? But at least we've got the World Cup this time, so we won't be bored. It's that sort of football that you can watch carefree and just kick back and enjoy it in the sun, I guess. Right. It's official. It's a done deal. Unai Emery has been appointed as the new head coach of Arsenal. Now, interestingly, Emery wasn't on many people's radars until Monday when Guillaume Balaguer reported the Spaniard was in London for talks with the club's hierarchy. It was then reported later that night by the BBC's David Ornstein that an agreement had been reached and the announcement would be made during the week. Lo and behold, that's exactly what happened, apart from the fact they weren't in London. They'd flown out to Atlanta or something like that anyway. So almost correct information. Chris, I'm going to come to you first on this. As an Arsenal fan, what was your initial reaction to the news? Pleased, or are you feeling a little bit underwhelmed?
It was a funny one because obviously we all thought that it was going to be Arteta, and it did seem very, very close to doing that. But Unai Emery impressed the board. I'm sure you heard what Gazidis said today about how he came in the interview and totally blew everyone away about his knowledge of the game and the club as well. You know, as it sort of, I think it's because people were getting used to it going to be Arteta. I think they sort of warmed to Arteta and accepted that, and sort of you know, a couple of days ago, obviously Emery came out as another name, and I am happy. I'm happy. He's experienced. You know, he's been successful everywhere he's been. He's done some amazing work at the clubs as well. And I think he's got a winning mentality. He's going to bring something different. He loves his tactics, and he puts a lot of effort in on the training field and also in his office as well. I think it's a very good appointment, and I think it's going to be an exciting future with him in charge.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Now, James, you cover Arsenal extremely closely, and given what you know about the structure at the Emirates and Gazidis' decision to take us in a more continental direction in terms of the setup, do you think Unai Emery is the right fit, and why?
Yeah, I do think he's the right fit, because if you look at his track record aside from PSG, and you kind of almost have to take what happened at Paris Saint-Germain out of the equation, because it's such a difficult club. I mean, you know, it's a club where your only job is to win the Champions League. Even Man City and Bayern Munich and even Real Madrid don't expect that of their managers. If you look at kind of the other clubs he's worked at, particularly Valencia and Sevilla, what he's been very good at is developing young players, developing, you know, diamonds in the rough that have been found for him by Monchi, who he had a great relationship with at Sevilla. He was a bit more kind of hands-on at Valencia, but in both of those setups, a lot of the players were being foisted on him. He also had to get quite used to his best players being sold on behind his back, or however you want to phrase it. He, you know, at Valencia, for instance, he lost David Silva, Juan Mata, and another striker whose name I lost. But you know, he lost a lot of very good players. He lost the heart of a very good team there, and he managed to keep that team in the top three in Spain. You know, which I guess you might say is the equivalent of a top four finish in England, and that's what Arsenal need right now. I mean, you know, in his press conference, and I'm sure we'll come on to speak about that, he was talking about competing for titles and making Arsenal the best team in the world. But right now, Arsenal need a manager who can get them in the top four and who can do that relatively under-resourced compared to the Manchester clubs and Chelsea. He's going to have to be able to do this on the cheap. So in terms of being able to fit into a continental system, he's got experience with that. He knows that he's not going to have full power. That, you know, Sven Mislintat's been hired for a reason. Same with Raul Sanllehi. He's a good fit. He's a good fit, and it took me a while to kind of get my head around it, but a good choice.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was one of those things that when I first heard it, I was a bit like, not too sure. But as time's gone on and I've sort of looked into his background a little bit more and had some time to gather my thoughts, I think, yeah, more and more I'm thinking that, yeah, it is the right fit, and I completely agree. Now, Chris, you've already touched on this, but like you said, most people were dead certain it was going to be Mikel Arteta, including myself. And to quote Ivan Gazidis today, those who know won't speak and those who speak won't know. Does this tell us as supporters that perhaps we should stop trying to second guess a club who are clearly so good at keeping their business under wraps?
Yeah, I mean, Arsenal have always been a club to keep things very tight-lipped and as quiet as they can. I put on Twitter today, whenever I approached someone at the club and spoke to someone at the club, they weren't giving anything away at all. And you know, even people that usually do get fed by the club, you know, said it was going to be Arteta as well. And you know, I think there was genuine interest in Arteta, no doubt about it. And I think discussions were held at some point, and they've obviously gone with the more experience there. So I think it was always going to be such a thorough process choosing a new manager. And they said at the start, Ivan Gazidis said, but after Wenger announced he was leaving at the end of the season, that it was going to be a confidential discussions taking place and a confidential process. And they were going to try and do things the right way. So we've got, you know, I respect that. You know, I think it's the way it should be, as much as possible. Obviously, you're going to get a few whispers coming out now and again, a few rumours. That's normal with any story and process that's happening at any football club. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, they've done a thorough process and they've, I think, made a right choice.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. James, Ivan Gazidis, as we've already said, went into a great deal regarding the process today. He informed us that the first interview took place on April 25th and the last was conducted on the 15th of May. So it's a process that's lasted just short of a month, I guess. And he spoke of a 100-page dossier with references, analysis, video, and lots of background information that was used to present their recommendation to the board. Now, can the Gunner supporters have faith in the trio of Gazidis, Sanllehi and Mislintat after all? Because, you know, they get a lot of criticism, Paul Gazidis has anyway, over the past few seasons.
I mean, Ivan Gazidis is going to tell you what makes Ivan Gazidis look best. And, you know, a thorough search where every candidate hadn't withdrawn from the race is a great way of showing how Arsenal went about this. I mean, he also said it was the most desirable job in the world. Emery said that, you know, this could be the biggest club in the world. You know, there's a certain bit of hyperbole. Well, there's a lot of hyperbole in all of that. And at the same time, the way that Arsenal have gone about appointing their manager is exactly the way that, whether you're a fan of Arsenal or a fan of any other club, you would probably want to see business being done. You know, they didn't interview anyone until after they confirmed that Arsene Wenger was going. They took their time. They properly sat down and interviewed people. And, you know, that doesn't happen that often in football. You know, Chelsea aren't the sort of team that will always do that. It is significant that they went about these things thoroughly. And I don't want to give the game away too much, but he was, you know, they are insistent. He was the first choice. They never made an offer to anyone else. Now, Mikel Arteta might turn around and say, yeah, you didn't make me an offer, but you did ask me about my backroom staff and how I'd want to set that up. So, you know, that's maybe something that doesn't kind of fit into Gazidis' narrative quite perfectly, but it seems like they've gone about things the right way. I would love to get a hold of that dossier. I don't think we ever will see that. That will never see the light of day. But, you know, in November when they lose 2-0 to Watford, people are going to start saying to Emery, "Oh, what was in your dossier about when Shadra Mustafi realised he can't head a ball clear or can't cover his near post?" I'm fascinated what's in there about that, but we'll never know. That would be the great unknowable of the Arsenal interview process.
Yeah, that's right. And you mentioned there the backroom staff, and when talking about Arteta. Now, Chris, I'm going to refer to one of our listener questions now because it ties in perfectly with where we're at in the show. Harris14 on Twitter says, "What's the story on the background staff? Are we close to making any new appointments?" Chris, is there anything you know regarding that? I mean, I guess Emery's going to want to bring in some of his own people, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. That would have been something that was already been talked about before the appointment, and something they would have gone over, Emery with the board. Juan Carlos Caicedo, if you have to be give me time with these, how you pronounce some of these. He's been Emery's assistant since since around 2006. So I'd definitely expect him to come in. You got Villanueva, who's a technical coach, Misic is fitness coach, and Manes is video analyst, because obviously we know Emery watches quite a lot of videos, and he does his homework on the videos from previous games and training sessions as well. So they're the names that have been mentioned, and are sort of likely to come in, if anyone. Obviously, a goalkeeping coach is a possibility as well, although Jens Lehmann's been mentioned to maybe take over in that role. We'll have to wait and see. So with the backroom staff, something would have already been sorted out behind the scenes, I'm certain, and we'll probably hear about them very soon.
I think Gazidis said something about that, didn't he? That he'd prepared how his backroom staff were going to blend in with what was already there. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, that was mentioned.
Yeah, cool. Thought so. James, I mean, look, we're talking about his dossiers and all his sort of research that he's done and stuff ahead of sort of coming to the interview. Looking at our current squad, who do you think he'll be most excited about working with?
He was very excited about Mesut Ozil in the press conference. He was absolutely glowing about him. I think he kind of said, Ozil's one of the best players, something like that. His English wasn't great, so I think there's my recollection of it. He said Ozil was one of the best players and the sort of player he wanted to work with. It was interesting that when it was put to him about Jack Wilshere, he was very reluctant to talk about Wilshere, which I found quite interesting. Aubameyang will be another one he really likes, so I'm told. He's excited about what he can do with Aubameyang. Why wouldn't you be after the end of this season? I guess also, he did say that there would be some small changes around the squad. One to keep an eye on is Jean-Michel Seri at Nice. And I think, kind of dependent on what happens with Aaron Ramsey, I think that Emery will want to bring in players. I know that Seri's one that he likes, one that Arsenal were keen on, kind of even before they decided to go with Emery. So yeah, he will want to make additions to this squad. But yeah, really looking forward to working with Aubameyang and Ozil, and I'm fascinated to see kind of what he does with Ozil in a positional sense. Obviously, he's played wide right a lot this season in a 4-3-3. Emery plays this 4-3-3 quite a lot, but obviously we know that Ozil is best as that 10. The question is, can you kind of fit him in and keep solidity in defence?
Yeah, it's whether he can accommodate it, isn't it? We touched on Jack Wilshere there as well. Now, for me, I'm concerned about Jack Wilshere now because even though I'm not his biggest fan, and I get a lot of stick for this, I'm not his biggest fan. I think he is overrated, and I think people let sort of the fact that he's a homegrown player cloud their judgment when discussing him. But I'm concerned that Emery's style of football, which we know is very physically demanding, requires hard work and a lot of intense pressing. I'm concerned that Jack Wilshere won't be able to hold his own in this team, and won't be able to please Emery in terms of what he wants to see from his midfield players. Chris, are you expecting Jack Wilshere to walk away this summer?
Well, the last that was mentioned about Jack Wilshere was that he was set to sign a new contract, but nothing really has been said about that anymore since the reports came out a week or two ago. I do see your point. Obviously, in the past, the club have had to be very careful with Jack Wilshere when recovering from injury, coming back from injury, and when he's starting to get more playing time again, because they knew how obviously injury prone he was. So I think Emery will know if Jack does indeed end up staying. I think Emery will know how to use him and how to get him sort of, not only him but all of the players into his new sort of methods on the training ground and the intensity like you mentioned. So certainly it'll be interesting to see how he handles it. It'll be interesting to see how the whole squad handles it. It's going to be, like you said, more determined, physical, and high intensity methods and training sessions. So it'll certainly be interesting to see how that all pans out.
Just one thing to point out on Wilshere, he has been offered a new. The latest deal is about 100 grand a week, and he's minded to accept it. So it would seem quite unlikely that he would go, because unless Arsenal withdraw an offer, which would be incredibly bad form from them, he's got a deal there he wants to sign for the next 3 years. But I certainly would agree with you that he's the sort of player that could struggle to fit into the system.
Yeah, that's my concern. And obviously, in an ideal world, I'd love Jack Wilshere to stay. I don't think there's an Arsenal fan out there that wants to see him leave. I've never rated him to the same sort of degree as some other Arsenal fans have, and I don't know. I really don't know what it is. I just think people get carried away with the fact he's English and he's come through and so on, and he's been there. When it was his first game, when he was like 17, 18, he broke through and impressed straight away, and it's just never really gone on from that. And that's my thing, Oh well, let's move on. Right, James, Emery thanked Arsene Wenger for his legacy and for all he had learned from the great man. Now, there's no question Arsene's DNA runs right throughout the football club. But in your opinion, does that make it harder for Emery to stamp his authority on the job? Or do you think Gazidis and co have done enough now to create the perfect environment for him?
Yeah, I almost think that kind of Gazidis and the rest of the team have kind of given him a bit more space, because we're always going to compare this to what happened after Sir Alex Ferguson left Man United. Well, when that happened, they basically tried to go and make their own Sir Alex Ferguson again. David Moyes was given a 6-year contract, told, build a dynasty here, settle down, you're here for the long haul, and you are in charge. You are going to do what Fergie did all over again. That's not the remit with Emery. It's very clear you're here to coach the team to get the best out of the players we give you. Obviously, your input is appreciated on transfers, but you are a coach, not a manager. That's hugely significant, and that gives him a lot more space to work. It also means that there is more pressure on Mislintat and Sanllehi, because I think Arsenal fans now are smart enough to know this isn't just about Emery. Emery's a good coach, but there needs to be a system in place to help get the most out of him. The other thing is he's on a 3-year contract. That is enough time to stamp your mark on a club, but it's also a kind of an acceptance that this is 2018. We don't hire people to manage this club for 6-7 years. The truth is, in 3 years' time, we might find that Emery's short on ideas, that what he's made his impact, and what you don't want to be doing is kind of wishing you were able to move on from a manager like Chelsea are now with Conte, where they might just have to pay him £9 million for the next year to not turn up. Arsenal have done this. I think actually Arsenal have put in place a perfect structure, although we still need to work out how Sanllehi and Mislintat, who are from two quite different footballing backgrounds, how they'll really mesh together. But they made that, they've made a safe decision, and they've not overcommitted to Emery. Emery is not being kind of trumpeted as the solution for all of Arsenal's problems. He's just a really good coach who should be able to get the best out of the players.
Yeah, no, fair point. Completely agree. Let's move on. Last listener question, because unfortunately it's all we got time for. Apologies to those of you who we didn't get to answer your questions. I'm sure if you tag them on Twitter with the hashtag Chronicles AFC, we'll get around to answering them. Well, I'll definitely get around to answering them on Twitter at least. This one is from Vishnu Patatil. I'm going to put this one to you, Chris. What would be the strategy in dealing with our defensive woes? Are we looking at a complete revamp or to strengthen using our existing resources?
Good question. I mean, there's obviously
really well worded.
Yeah. there's been players looked at in the transfer, because obviously we have started making plans for the summer and potential transfer plans. There's been a couple of defenders looked at, so I fully expect maybe one or two. You never know, even more. It depends what the board and Emery want of defensive recruitments to come in. But also we've got some decent young talent to work with. I mean, Mavro Panos came in and had 2 solid games in my opinion, until obviously that Leicester game where it went a bit pear-shaped for him. But I think he's got a lot of potential, and I think again, Emery, another player, Emery will be very good to work with, and Holden, Chambers. I think Chambers has been decent when I've watched him. Just towards the end of the season, he played a few more games and he put in some really good performances. And people started turning their attention more to Chambers than they were Holden at the start. We didn't really know if Chambers would have a future at Arsenal after that Middlesbrough loan. They didn't know if they were going to keep him or not. But I think when he's played, he's done well. Obviously, Koscielny's out of the World Cup with his injury. And again, that concerns me a little bit for the long term. I think we need to be looking at replacement for him. There's obviously a huge question mark around Mustafi and his ability, and we've talked about it on here before. It will certainly be interesting to see if he stays. There's been just sort of odd rumours going around that Arsenal are prepared to sell him, but we'll have to wait and see. I think it'll be interesting to see how Emery comes in and improves that area. Certainly, I think the club and Emery will know. They would have talked about it as well. Obviously, Wenger personally spoke to Emery before him taking the job and told him where he thinks the squad needs improving. So I think we'll give the youngsters a chance. I know. I think we'll give the youngsters a chance, but at the same time, I think we'll also dip into the transfer market and get maybe 1 or 2 defensive recruitments.
Yeah, no, great stuff. That brings us to the end of another episode. I guess the only question is, they spoke about us interviewing 8 candidates. I wonder who the other 7 were. But it doesn't matter anyway, because Unai Emery is the Arsenal head coach. I've got to get used to saying that and not manager. Thank you very much to my 2 brilliant guests. Gents, do you want to share your Twitter handles and how people can keep up to date with your work, James?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is @JamesBenge. Best place to get all my work is obviously standard.co.uk/football. And there's loads of Arsenal coverage, and there's a bit more to come this evening as well. Lots of interesting stuff.
Good stuff. Chris, do you want to share your Twitter handle and tell people how they can keep up to date with your latest doings?
Yeah, sure. I'm mostly active on Twitter as it is. So at @C_Davison_AFC. And obviously just keeping all the fans up to date with everything that's going on as much as possible.
Good stuff. Right, if you're listening via iTunes, hit subscribe and leave us a review. We really do appreciate your support. The season may be over, but the content will still keep coming. Up the Gunners.